name is Alyssa. I'm 28. And in November of 2021, I was working as a certified nursing assistant on the overnight shift at a mid-sized hospital outside Louisville, Kentucky, on the 3rd floor, which handled general medical patients. Nothing especially high acuity, mostly people recovering from procedures or being monitored for a few days before discharge. I'd worked nights for almost 2 years by then and had my routine down, checking vitals every couple hours, answering call lights, doing rounds with the 2 other aides on shift. That particular Tuesday night was quiet, which nights on that floor usually were after about 11, once most patients had settled and visitors had gone home. We had maybe 14 patients on the floor, a light census for us. And I remember specifically thinking around 1 a.m. that it was shaping up to be an easy night, the kind where you actually get through your charting on time. Around 1:30, the call light for room 314 came on. An elderly patient named Mr. Halloran, who'd been admitted for pneumonia and was doing fine, mostly asking for water or help repositioning when he called. I went in expecting the usual and instead found him sitting bolt upright in bed, visibly shaken, telling me someone had been standing at the foot of his bed a few minutes earlier, just standing there watching him before walking out when he turned on his call light. I told him it was probably one of the other staff checking on him, since, with dementia being common on our floor, patients misidentifying a nurse or tech for something stranger wasn't unusual, and I made a note in his chart and moved on without much concern. 40 minutes later, a different patient, a woman in 318, recovering from gallbladder surgery, who was completely lucid and not on anything that would cause hallucinations, used her call light to ask if someone was supposed to be checking on patients without saying anything, describing someone standing near her door for a moment before stepping back out into the hallway. 2 unrelated patients on the same wing describing the same thing within an hour made the confused patient explanation a lot less comfortable to lean on. But I still told myself it could be a new float nurse or a tech from another floor, covering a shift who didn't know to announce themselves since staffing shuffles happened constantly. I mentioned it to the charge nurse at the next round, and she pulled up the badge access log for our wing out of caution rather than real alarm at that point. It showed exactly the staff who were supposed to be on shift. Nobody unaccounted for, no extra badge swipes into our wing all night. That's when the explanation I'd been holding on to stopped making sense, and the charge nurse's expression changed from mildly concerned to actually alert. We started doing rounds in pairs instead of splitting up, and about 20 minutes into that, one of the other aides, walking the far end of the hall with me, stopped and grabbed my arm, nodding toward a supply closet door near room 322 that was propped open maybe an inch. A door that's supposed to stay closed and locked outside of restocking hours. We called security instead of opening it ourselves, and 2 officers arrived within about 5 minutes and found a man crouched inside among the linen shelves, wearing scrubs that didn't match our floor's badge colors and had no ID badge on him at all. He wasn't a patient and wasn't hospital staff. Security walked him out to the lobby for the police, and it came out afterward that he'd apparently been slipping into patient floors at various hospitals in the area over several months. Always at night, always in stolen or purchased scrubs. that got him past a casual glance, standing in rooms and watching sedated or elderly patients before slipping back out when someone stirred. Nothing was ever taken from any room, as far as anyone could tell, which somehow made it worse, not knowing what he actually wanted. I still don't fully know what would have happened if that closet door had been shut all the way instead of catching on something and staying open that inch. We check badges now, everyone, every shift, no exceptions, even for people we half recognize. And I still think about Mr. Halloran sitting bolt upright at 1:30 in the morning, telling me the truth the whole time. My name's Trevor. I'm 34. And in February of 2023, I was staying overnight in my dad's hospital room at a hospital in Tucson while he recovered from a triple bypass surgery, sleeping in the fold-out visitor chair the way I had for 3 nights straight by that point. He was doing okay, still groggy and on a fair amount of pain medication, sleeping most of the time, and I mostly stayed because he'd asked me to and because sitting in a waiting room, texting family updates, felt worse than actually being in the room with him. The room had that specific hospital rhythm you get used to fast. The beeping of his monitors, nurses coming in every couple hours to check vitals, the hallway lights dimmed but never fully dark. By the 3rd night, I'd basically adapted to sleeping through most of it, only really waking for the vitals checks or if his monitor alarm went off for something minor like a sensor slipping. Around 2 a.m. that 3rd night, I woke up because I felt like someone was standing near the foot of the bed. That specific awareness you get of a person nearby, even with your eyes still closed. I opened my eyes expecting a nurse doing rounds, which happened constantly. But the shape near the foot of the bed wasn't moving toward the monitors or my dad's IV line the way staff always did. It was just standing there. And in the dim light, I couldn't make out a face or scrubs clearly, just a shape. I told myself I was half asleep and disoriented, that my eyes hadn't adjusted yet, and that it was obviously a nurse, who I'd simply catch mid-blink before she moved on to actually checking his vitals like normal. I sat up further to get a clearer look, and the shape was already moving toward the door, unhurried, and stepped out into the hallway without saying anything, which every actual nurse who'd come in over the previous 3 nights had always done. A soft, just checking his vitals or similar, every single time, without exception. I sat there in the dark, with my heart going harder than made sense for what I was telling myself was nothing. And after a minute, I got up and looked down the hallway myself. It was empty in both directions. No one at the nurse's station less than 30 feet away, which was strange on its own since it was staffed continuously as far as I'd seen the whole stay. I used the call button and a nurse arrived within a couple minutes, someone I recognized from earlier that day, and I asked her directly if someone had just been in to check on my dad. She said no one from her team had been in the room in the last 40 minutes, that his next vitals check wasn't due for another 20. I described what I'd seen, expecting her to explain it away with an easy answer about another department or a tech doing rounds. But her expression shifted into something more careful instead, and she said she'd flag it to the charge nurse and security just to be safe. Hospital security reviewed the hallway camera footage from that block of time and confirmed a man in scrubs without a visible ID badge had walked past the nurse's station during a brief window, when the 2 staff normally posted there had both stepped away, one to another patient's emergency and one to the restroom. and had entered 2 other patient rooms on that same wing before mine, always for less than a minute, always leaving before anyone caught him directly. My dad's room was the 3rd. Hospital police were called and reviewed footage from the stairwell exit he'd apparently used to leave the building entirely before anyone could stop him. And as far as I know, he was never identified. They added a 2nd staff member to that nurse's station overnight starting that same week. And my dad's care team checked in on him more frequently for the rest of his stay without me having to ask. I never saw a face, never got confirmation of exactly what that shape near the bed had been doing there. And I still sleep with one eye open, so to speak, whenever I'm the only one awake in a room that isn't fully mine. I'm Darnell, 37, and in June of 2022, I worked hospital security at a medical center in Memphis, mostly overnight shifts covering the building's public areas along with the basement level, which housed the morgue, central sterile processing, and a locked pharmacy storage room that held overflow medication stock that didn't fit in the floor-level pharmacy. The basement wasn't glamorous work, mostly checking doors and making sure nobody wandered down there who wasn't supposed to, since it wasn't a place patients or visitors had any real reason to be. My round through the basement happened twice a shift, roughly 10 p.m. and 3 a.m., walking the main corridor, checking that the morgue's cooler room stayed locked, and confirming the pharmacy storage door was secure, all logged on a checklist I signed at each stop. For most of the 8 months I'd worked there, the basement was the single most uneventful part of my whole shift. Just fluorescent lights humming over empty tile and the occasional maintenance guy finishing up a late job. On a Thursday night that June, my 10 p.m. round was completely normal. At 3 a.m., walking the same corridor, I noticed the pharmacy storage door slightly ajar, maybe an inch, where it should have been flush and locked like it always was. I stood there and told myself a pharmacy tech had probably come down for an overflow pull and just hadn't pulled it shut all the way behind them, since that had genuinely happened once or twice before during my time there, usually late in the evening when someone was juggling too much at once. I checked the sign-out log clipped to the wall beside the door, which every authorized pull was supposed to be logged in, and there was no entry for that night at all, nothing since the previous afternoon. That ruled out the tired tech explanation cleanly, and I didn't have anything to replace it with yet except the fact that the door was open and it shouldn't have been. I radioed the other overnight guard, a guy named Pete, who was covering the main lobby, and told him what I'd found, and we agreed I'd hold position and watch the door while he made his way down to back me up instead of me going in alone, which our protocol actually required for any confirmed access anomaly, not just recommended. While I waited, I heard movement inside, distinct and deliberate, shelving being shifted, not the random settling sound of an empty room. Pete got there in under 3 minutes, and the two of us went in together, flashlights up. We found a woman in her 20s, crouched near the controlled substance shelving with a duffel bag already half full, and she froze the second our lights hit her rather than trying to run, which in that narrow room probably wasn't much of an option anyway. She turned out to be a former hospital employee terminated from a housekeeping position 11 months earlier, who'd apparently kept a cloned or duplicated access card that should have been deactivated the day she was let go and hadn't been. A gap that came out clearly once IT pulled the badge system logs the next morning and found her old credentials still technically active the entire time. She was arrested on site once Memphis PD arrived, and hospital administration did a full audit of every terminated employee's badge access that same week, finding 2 other stale accounts that should have been shut off months earlier alongside hers. I still do my 3 a.m. round exactly the same way, but I check that sign-out log first now, every single time, before I even look at the door itself.